Guys, not to the microphone. This feels very Mick Jagger, I was saying. So, you guys are my first, I've done so much virtual speaking, but you guys are my first in-person speaking. Besides, I actually just spoke to some 7th graders, so you're probably more exciting than the 7th graders. It's like the first period, like half of them were like sleeping. So yeah, that's Lady Fuller. Thank you, Ellen, for that wonderful introduction. So I am going to speak to you guys today, and thankfully I'm not going to speak about hospitality, and I'm not going to speak about the meeting industry, and most importantly, I'm not going to speak about COVID. So you can relax. This is more of a fun, feel-good speech to tell you a little bit about what I do, but also just encourage you to think about your own lives and how habit change and thinking about what you do every day can impact your overall life, right? So I'm a success coach, and I'm also obviously in the meetings industry. I run a corporate incentive travel business. We do gifts, but during COVID and before COVID, I knew that, and I'll tell you a little bit about my history in a second, I wanted to do something else with my life. Not that gifts aren't wonderful, but I had that business under control, and I really thought there has to be more meaning for me. I've been helping people sort of free of charge for a long time, and I went back to school and I got my master's certification in habit change and life coaching. So that was a big change for me, and I started to get certified in QPR certification, which is a suicide prevention certification, as well as Working Mind suicide prevention. So I also became a suicide prevention advocate and instructor. So that was sort of my COVID story. We all have one. But I'll tell you a little bit about me. So Habits for Happiness is the name of my program. So I'm a success coach that take people that have anxiety and move them towards abundance. And you're thinking, well, that sounds great, but how can you live a life with no anxiety? You can live a life with no anxiety if you look at your daily habits. And I like habits because habits are little things that we can digest. Happiness is sort of like this big concept, right? So is dropping anxiety. I had a client the other day who said, my goal is to have less anxiety. And I said, well, what about no anxiety? And he was like, do you think anybody lives with no anxiety? I was like, yes, people have no anxiety. It's actually your birthright not to have anxiety. And he started crying. He was like, I don't even know what my life would be like. So think for a second. If you experience any form of anxiety, what would your life be like without it? Pretty good. I know this does not involve skydiving. Just a good. So let me tell you a little bit about myself, because it's super important. You're thinking to yourself, like, who are you? Why are you here? And why are you talking to us about habits and anxiety? Well, I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana. How many of you guys have been to New Orleans? Yeah, it's a great place, right? And so from the outside looking in, I had this really idyllic life. I grew up in the Garden District of New Orleans, in a house that was 150 years old. Huge house, old wooden house. My mom was a model, she was a ballerina. My dad was an avid businessman. From the outside looking in, I had it all. And then I was with 9. My mother died by suicide. She actually jumped off the Mississippi River Bridge in New Orleans. And I didn't even know what suicide was. So you can imagine, my daughter's 9. So to look at my daughter, I think, oh my gosh, what a small age to be experiencing life, But no one talked about it. It was like it never happened. Now let me give you another piece of information. My mother's name was Lady, and I look like her. So I was this walking sort of ghost of my mother, but no one could say the words. My dad went on to get remarried very shortly thereafter and had a baby, and no one ever talked about where my mom went. Weird, right? But not that weird if you've had any exposure with suicide. How many of you know somebody who's died by suicide? Yeah, most of us, right? So fast forward to my teenage years, and for those of you who've been to New Orleans, drinking's a big deal in New Orleans, right? New Orleans is like the bon temps roulette, let the good times roll. Anything goes. So, around age 14, I think I had my first drink, and I thought to myself, this is pretty good. My pain's kind of going away. I can't really talk about what's happening with me because no one wants to talk about it, but drinking's a great habit to get your pain to go away, right? It feels good to be numb, especially if you don't feel good, right? So around age 14, I started drinking. My drinking wasn't different or weird of anyone else. I mean, in New Orleans, there's a reason to drink for everything. A hurricane, a breakfast, a dinner, a lunch, you name it. So, fast forward, I don't know, let's call it, 10 years. I'm 24, I'm living in San Francisco, I'm about to get my master's in business. I'm still drinking, partying just like everyone else. I don't look weird to other people. We're all sort of doing the same thing. But I knew in my heart of hearts that, this was not the full version of myself. I knew inside of me that I had terrible debilitating anxiety, which was probably caused by the drinking, but it was also probably caused by this childhood trauma I just never dealt with. So I go to therapy, and I just begin sort of the therapeutic journey, right? Again, sort of living this idea that if I get a master's, if I meet someone, which I did, and then I have some kids, which I did, and then I start a business, which I did, I would find happiness. Fast forward 10 more years, 5 more years after that, I sold my business. I had 2 kids. I lived in a big house. I moved to Aspen. I had a really gorgeous husband. And I was really, excuse my language, fucking unhappy. I did everything everyone told me to do, and I've been going to therapy. What gives? And I really had to look at my life and realize that what I had been searching for wasn't outside of myself, right? Fast forward a couple more years, I get a divorce. Then I quit drinking. And I quit drinking because one day I woke up and I was like, this is a habit of a choice I made when I was 14 years old. And somehow, I never thought that that was a bad decision. That's old programming running on current software, right? So, then COVID hits, and I thought to myself, I don't know about you, but my gifting company took like a 96% revenue hit. And I was like, there has to be something else. There has to be something else. And I'd wanted to do suicide prevention work for a long, long time, and I started to do a lot of speaking around it. But that's a hard thing to speak about. Not everybody wants to hear about it, right? So I thought, how do you get people upstream? How do you get people upstream from getting to the place where they don't want to be here anymore? Well, you know what? No one ever taught me how to be happy. Maybe that's a parenting fail, but I don't think anyone talks to us about what that even means, right? I went to school for I got my master's. No one ever sat me down and told me what I could do every day to make me happier. I learned a lot of other things, but it seems a little weird, doesn't it? So I started to think, we should be able to get our MBA in happiness, right? Someone should give us a certification that we passed that course. So that's what I aim to do, right? So that's a bit of my journey. So how do I teach people? Well, first I talk to them about habits, right? Habits is not something you probably think about very much. But think about this. Every single day of your life is basically a small microcosm of your life. Because how you show up every day is how you show up in your life. Truly, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if you can control your environment for just a day, then you can control the outcome of this beautiful life. Doesn't that seem simpler than someone telling you go off and be happy? It does. It seems like you have agency over your whole experience, right? But no one also talks to you about what are habits. So 96% of what we do every day is habitual. Okay, so why? Because your brain is trying to save space so it can do rational thinking so that you can spend time at work, solving problems. So what's a habit? Brushing your teeth, right? You don't think about brushing your teeth, you wake up and you brush your teeth. So you're on autopilot for a habit. So that's a good habit. But there's a lot of bad habits too. And habits are just choices that we made a long time ago that we haven't unmade yet. So like if we made a choice at age 14 to have a bad drinking habit, and we're 40 and we're still doing that habit, and we haven't looked at it, maybe that habit doesn't serve us. Maybe having that habit is not something we want to do for the rest of our lives. But we don't stop and think about that very much, do we? No. So right now, you don't have to share it with me. Write down one habit in your daily life you'd like to change. Okay, you guys got that? Now, I'm not going to ask you to ever share it, but it's important that we identify habits if we ever want to change them. And truly, in the course of change work, any type of change work, the first step is awareness. Right? I knew for a long time I wanted to stop drinking, but I actually didn't stop drinking for a long time because I was scared if I stopped drinking, someone would label me an alcoholic. So I kept drinking. And also, I was in awareness hell, which is once you reach the first step of change work and you don't change it, then you're stuck knowing it's a problem and not changing it. So let me tell you a little bit about habits work, okay? So habits work like this. They work, I'll give you this example, because this week, as we all go back to the work day. So you get a cue, it's time. The time says go get some cookies to your brain at the cafeteria. So you go to the cafeteria, you buy some cookies, and the reward is socializing with your friends, right? Because that's how habits work. So we're triggered, we engage in a routine, and then we have a reward. So think about your bad habit in that way. So your habit is the routine. The trigger is causing you to have that habit, and the reward is what that habit gives you. So in the example of drinking, for me, it gave me numbness. And so every habit has a positive intention, but sometimes those old habits aren't serving us today, right? So let me give you an example. So you're sitting at home, the phone rings, you pick it up. It's your mother-in-law. She says she's coming to visit you tomorrow. You eat an entire box of Oreos. Now this would be an example of bad habits triggered by the experience. The trigger was your mother-in-law calling. And the routine was eating a whole box of Oreos because you were having a panic attack. And the reward was that now you're too full to think about that she's coming because you're beating yourself up, right? So when we work in habit change, we look at bad habits and we think, how can we get that same reward with a different routine? Right? So in the example of the cookies, the cue is the time. You go to the cafeteria, you get some water, and you get to chat with your friends, right? So you still get the same reward, and now you're drinking water. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, now the big one. What is happiness? Anyone to tell me what their version of happiness is? Anyone? Go ahead.
Positive attitude.
Positive attitude? Anyone else want to take a stand? Go ahead.
Not feeling stressed or overwhelmed.
Not feeling stressed or overwhelmed.
Cup of coffee in the morning.
Cup of coffee in the morning.
I like to say peace of mind.
Peace of mind. Yeah. Anyone else? Go ahead.
Living in the moment.
Living in the moment. You guys are tuned in. I like it. You know, happiness is subjective, right? It's personal to all of us. But I've coached enough people to come up with my own definition of happiness. And my own definition of happiness, really combined from everything you've said, is the idea of being unbothered. It's kind of a funny thing. How in the world did she get unbothered to be a synonym of happiness? Well, the idea is that, the ancients, for thousands of years, have been telling us this. And somehow, we got so disconnected from our environment that the people that lived 2,000 years ago are smarter than us, right? Because happiness is not out there, it's in here, right? So the myth that I was living was that if I just drank enough, if I just had those 2.5 kids, if I just married the best looking person in the room and started a really big business and moved to a great house in a great town, I was going to be happy. But that's the myth. And what I'm here to tell you is you have agency about finding your own happiness, right? And so when someone asks you that they're chasing the shiny object, you know the shiny object's in you. Isn't that wonderful to know? We have complete agency over our happiness. And that's why happiness is unbothered. Because if we're not affected by external events, and we know that we are the wellspring of our own well-being, that we can resource ourselves no matter what's happening, we can fill our own buckets, then we win. Okay, enough of that. Let's talk about habits. So there's no set amount of bad or good habits. I actually have a Facebook group called Habits for Happiness, and every Monday night I go live and talk about a good or a bad habit. Now people love this stuff. They love to talk about habits, right? And so I'm going to start with some bad habits. This is, of course, just some examples. This is not all the bad habits. It definitely might not be something you wrote down. But then we're going to talk about good habits, so we'll end on a positive note. So the first bad habit is procrastinating. Who here procrastinates? Humans love suffering, isn't that funny? I've coached so many people, I think, why do we love suffering so much? We are our worst enemies. But procrastinating, actually, in a time management study by Inc. magazine, we waste 3 to 5 hours a day procrastinating. It's a lot of time. If you think you watch television 4 hours a day, between procrastinating and television, you're pretty much done. There's not much else to do, you know? And what is procrastinating? Procrastinating might be you're supposed to be working on a project, and instead you're watching puppy videos on YouTube. You know, you can do what I do, which is a bad habit, which is procrastinate. Instead of sending that one difficult email, you clear out your inbox of all the other emails, right? It's called procrastinating productively. Or, you know, you're working from home and you're folding laundry. That's more important than getting the report into your boss, right? All these things. So how do we stop procrastinating? So something I work on with my clients is time management skills. So I work with corporate groups too, and one of the things is productivity is actually really, really simple. It just takes focus. And we're so ADD, it's super hard to focus. But there's really this rule of critical 3. There's only 3 things you actually have to get done at work every day. You know, if you're a boss, close your ears, but really it's true. And if you can get those 3 things done before 10 a.m., you will be productive. Then you can procrastinate all you want, right? So I have my clients write down the 3 things, either before they go to bed at night, for the next day, or the morning of, and then do them. Because you actually are only productive for about 3 to 5 hours a day anyway. You're at your peak productivity time in the morning, when your brain's the most rested. Okay, being late. Who here's been late? Who here's chronically late? No? You want to bet it? This is a funny one. Being late. It's people don't realize that they're late until they look at their habits. It's a habit. It's a learned habit actually. Usually people are late, like their parents were late or whatever. But the one thing I always tell people, it doesn't matter if you have the biggest education in the room. It doesn't matter if you have the most money in the room. It really doesn't matter if you're the smartest person in the room. If you show up late to a meeting, you've given your power away. If you show up to a negotiation late, you lost. You might as well just not show up, right? Being late says to someone else that your time's more important than theirs. And truthfully, from a Southern girl, it's just bad manners, right? I did it today, but I was lost in this, you know. So that's something that's free, right? These are all free, which is so great. So we can control being on time. And if you chronically are too late, then you really should think about your calendar. Most of us are triple booked or double booked. And you gotta have less on your calendar. It's called calendar decluttering. It's like decluttering your closet. It's actually like an amazing, expansive activity. So, bad habit, okay? Self-sabotage. Who knows what this one is? Anyone want to take a stab? Go ahead.
Oh, I know what it is. For me to put it into words, man.
You self-sabotage.
Yeah, I just self-sabotage myself. I mean, it's doing the first two things and not taking control of the situation. Like I procrastinate, and that is self-sabotaging because regardless, I've got to get back to that client. So I get it. I understand. I just did it to myself in front of all of you.
Self-sabotage, it's so funny. I work on clients pretty much all different things. And the most interesting thing is we all end up here. We all end up talking about the topic of self-sabotage. We all do it. I'm telling you, humans like to suffer. It's the craziest thing. I don't know if it's because humans like a challenge of like getting back on the horse or what, but we are definitely our own worst enemy. We complain a lot about what's happening out there. Once we start looking at ourselves, we are definitely not our biggest fan, right? And why do we self-sabotage, right? So most people are like, why in the world? The definition is interrupting your own goals on purpose. So we do it subconsciously or we do it consciously. So an example of self-sabotage might be, I'm on a diet, I've committed to a 14-day, eating vegetables. I drive home from work. I stop at the grocery and I buy potato chips. Like, what is going on here? Why am I doing that to myself, right? One of it's a short-term reward, right? We could just need that short-term reward. But it's not really about willpower. It comes down to beliefs, actually, right? Because really in change work, we work with beliefs that we learn from our parents or some other person in our lives when we're young, and we never change our beliefs. So if we don't believe we're skinny or worthy of not eating potato chips, we will always default to stopping at the store. Because our beliefs shape our identity, and our identity shapes our behavior. It's interesting, right? Self-sabotage I could talk about for another hour, and I won't, but if you have questions about it, ask me later. But really, in order to stop self-sabotaging, we have to change the neural pathways in our brains, which is all habit change, right? And we have to start believing we are worthy of whatever it is we want to change. That sounds very simple, and it is, but it's also super complicated. Because we do and are who we believe we are, right? It's really amazing. I mean, you can actually look at any situation at work or in your life and find positive attributes. You can look at any situation in your work or your life and find negative attributes. So it's just about what you believe to look at. It's very simplistic and very complicated, like everything else. Who's here ready to talk about some good habits? That's heavy. Okay. Good habits. So when I work with clients to remove bad habits. But the way habit change works is you can't change a bad habit and put a new without putting a new habit in its place, right? Who's tried like scarcity dieting? It never works. We never stay on the diet because you can't just take things away. You have to add things in. So in my life with drinking, I really got addicted to my clarity. I'm very addicted to it. Actually, I think my clarity and my mornings are some of my superpowers. And I want to do those things more than I feel like drinking. It's an interesting way it works. If there was Oreos in my house, I keep using Oreos, I love Oreos, I would eat the whole bag. So I just don't put them in my house, right? But I also like the way I feel when I don't eat them more than when I eat them. So let's talk about water. Who here knows how much water you should be drinking a day? Go ahead.
Half my weight.
Yes, half your weight in ounces. Yeah. So for me, I weigh about 130 pounds or so, and that's 65 65 ounces, right? Which equates to about this much water a day. We're not talking soda, people. We're not talking coffee. We're not talking alcohol. And natural water, LaCroix does not count. Or any of the other bubble water, SodaStream, okay? So how in the world are you going to get that much water into your system a day? Let me just tell you, being dehydrated makes you moody. It makes you have low energy. It makes you actually have less thinking capacity, so at work, like productivity-wise. And mostly it makes you agitated, and it makes you anxious. See you guys over here drinking water. So something all my clients do, and I highly recommend this, is so when you wake up in the morning, do you know that you're your most dehydrated of the entire day? You lose like a liter, I think, of water overnight, so your body's detoxing. So it's really important to have like 2 liters of water when you first wake up. This is before your morning coffee. Now you will email me later and thank me for this one. It is life-changing. Well, 1, you're that farther into your day full of water, right? And 2, it moves everything going on here. Your face will start to actually like change and look more hydrated. You'll look younger. You'll have tons more energy. I'm telling you, this water thing is free. It's amazing. Sleep. You know, I have a 30-day program, 30 days to sleep like a baby, because so many people come to me and they're like, I can't sleep. I'm taking this, I'm taking that, I'm taking CBD gummies, I'm taking melatonin, I can't sleep. And I'm like, well, tell me about what's happening before you go to sleep. Well, the biggest change in our sleep cycles today is something you probably wouldn't expect. Did you know that people sleep worse today due to electricity? Right? So we're animals, right? And we have circadian rhythms, and our circadian rhythms, like all animals, are tied to the rising of the sun and the sun going down. But then you introduce artificial light. And we further detach from our external environments in nature. We actually lose the ability with external lights to then be in synchronized form with the rest of nature. And that sounds very like woo-woo, but we got a lot of sleeping problems. So, I mean, do you guys like camping? A lot of people like camping. Like when I go camping, my sleep patterns change. You go to bed early and you wake up early because you're more in tune with nature and the sun. You also don't have Netflix or whatever. But, screens or TV, they tell, with artificial light in those devices, actually reduce your melatonin count. So when you're getting ready for bed and you start to look at an iPad or a TV, you actually become less sleepy. So it's no wonder that we're all like binging on technology before bed, and we like are worried that we can't understand why we can't sleep through the night. So I always suggest a power down hour. So the hour before bed, get rid of all technology. Sorry, Netflix. Watch it before your hour before bed. And I even say take technology out of the bedroom. No TV in the bedroom, put the phone in the bathroom. It shouldn't be by your head anyway while you're sleeping. Dim the lights. You can take like a hot bath, a hot shower. That's a trigger, actually, a cue for our body to then relax into a sleeping state. You know what I always tell people? Read. You'll get real sleepy. And your bedroom should be like a spa. It shouldn't have a lot of stuff in it. Put the stuff in the hall or in your office. Sleep aids, that's another thing people ask me about. Actually, sleep aids also give us a lot of anxiety, and they do eventually keep us up. So the goal is to really naturally try to find our circadian rhythms in our sort of unnatural world, right? Also, other things like caffeine or alcohol or sugar after 2 p.m. If you're really having sleep problems, is not a good thing. And I save the best for last. Morning routine. This is my favorite thing. Actually, in putting in a morning routine, who here has a morning routine? Morning routine actually, I probably increased my set point of happiness by like 20%. Right? Now, I'm going to say something about set point of happiness. I took this amazing course. You can take it. It's on Coursera, The Science of Well-Being from Yale. It's an amazing course taught by Laurie Santos, who's an amazing professor there. And she talks a lot about this idea of happiness and the idea of these external things that make us happier, or we think will make us happier. And she talks a lot about wanting. So like, who here is like, oh, if I just, get that promotion, or if I just buy that car, or I just get that lake house, like, I'll be happy. Like all of us, right? Well, she actually says that the data shows that if we want something and we get it, we're never as happy as we think we're going to be. We are for a short period of time, but then we go back to like sort of a set rate of happiness. And actually the reverse is true. So the things we fear, the things we have anxiety about, when they happen, we're not as unhappy as we think we're going to be. And actually shortly thereafter, our happiness goes back to this set rate. Only thing that can change our internal set rate of happiness are habit change. Internal changes in your neural pathways, right? Nothing out there. Just don't believe what they say. So the morning routine, I think, has the biggest impact on my clients' happiness. I don't know about you guys. And no, it does not involve waking up at 5 a.m. It can, but it doesn't, right? Most people come to me and they're like, but I'm not a morning person. I can't do a morning routine. And I'm like, oh, you will be when they're not finished with you. So, when I started a morning routine, I've been knowing I wanted to do a morning routine for like years. And I finally found the right morning routine for me. And I watched, and I encourage you to watch it. Hal Elrod has a movie. He also has a book called Miracle Morning. It's on Amazon Prime, the movie. He's genius. And he has a morning routine he asks people to do, and the acronym is SAVERS, and I can give you guys this information later. And it starts with 10 minutes of silence. So the 10 minutes of silence isn't meditating, but you'd wake up, have your 2 liters of water, and before you ever look at your phone or any other technology, you'll sit in silence for 10 minutes. And why? Not asking you to meditate. Because you're still in, I'm going to say this wrong, it's called the agnogogic state, right? That state when you first wake up. Do you ever solve your big life problems and you're laying there in bed hitting snooze? Because you're still tied to that super conscious part of yourself, or I like to think you're super tied to the universe or source or God or whatever. And you're able to solve so much of your day, even if you just let yourself think. It's wonderful to have that buffer between you and your day, right? It grounds you. The next thing he says is affirmations. You can just say one. I am worthy of financial abundance, right? I'm worthy of being whatever it is. I'm worthy of being happy. Because that's where our belief system changes. If we can tell ourselves and the world often enough that we are worthy of something, then we are. The next thing is visualization. And this is each one, just 10 minutes. Visualization, I like this acronym WOOP, where you think, what is the problem? What is the outcome you want? What is the obstacle? And what is the plan? It can be very short, right? The next thing is exercise, and no, I'm not talking about going hiking. This is 5 minutes of exercise. I just take my dog outside. Nature has this wonderful balancing effect. I take my dog outside. We walk 200 yards. My dog's super old, thankfully. We don't have to walk very far. We walk back inside and I finish my routine, right? But especially if I'm tired, this one's important. Because when your body hits the sun, it knows to wake up, right? The next thing is reading. So I read about 3 to 5 pages of a self-help, or it can be a devotional or whatever it is that you might save from your church or community or whatever, just to have something positive to start my day. And then the last thing is scribing. And I write something I'm grateful for, just one sentence. This also will change your neural pathways. I think gratitude is a wonderful habit. The next thing is I write down my 3 things I want to get done before 10 a.m. And I'm clear enough to be able to have had the space with all these other little mini habits to be able to really know what they are. And then last thing, I just write, how I'm feeling. And then I get up and start my day. And why is this so important? And why did this increase my happiness by 20%? Because it sets the tone for your day. How many of us have like woken up and like the kids are screaming, they want breakfast, you gotta get them to school, you gotta get to work, you're late, oh my God, the dog has to get walked, oh my gosh, and you're frantic, it sets the tone for the entire day. If you can set your tone for the day and be like proactive and grounded and sorted, and if each day is a microcosm of your whole life, and that's how your whole life ends up, it's a pretty happy life, right? It's doable. So that's where I'll leave my talking. Talked a lot. But I do want to open up for questions. If you guys have questions for me about habits, or how I work. You seem very quiet. Go ahead.
Do you set an alarm?
You know I do set an alarm. I do have a wooden clock that takes batteries. I do set an alarm, and I think it's important to, for sleep, most of us need different amounts of sleep. So sleep planning is a good thing, like to know if you're going to go to bed at 10, you need 8 hours, you wake up at 6. But I wake up usually like 5 minutes before my alarm. Just depends. Do you set an alarm?
I don't.
Yeah. And actually
And I don't know if
snoozing's a terrible habit. So
Yeah, I don't
just so you know, if you snooze, it will make you more tired.
How do you not?
Why does it make you more tired? Because you don't have a full sleep cycle. Full REM sleep cycle is about an hour and a half. So if you just take these 10 minutes, you're actually entering this place that's just going to make you drowsier. So you're actually going to be a lot more groggy and unproductive in your first 4 or 5 hours of the day. Go ahead.
How do you figure out how many hours of sleep you need?
Well,
What's the ideal amount for each person?
the answer is it depends, right? For me, I really like to sleep, and I like to nap, but I'm like so I sleep, like I can sleep 9 hours, but I know people who do great on 6. If you get less than 5, the data shows that you are sleep deprived. And sleep deprivation is a terrible habit. You know, it's like the #1 cause of like automobile accidents in America is sleep deprivation. We wonder why we're anxious, we're not sleeping, or drinking water. But yeah.
Because I feel like I've always thought 8 hours is the perfect amount for me, but I also think sometimes I wake up, maybe I've gotten too much sleep, like maybe 7 hours would be better for me.
It could be, you can just test it. You know, I have a lot of clients that keep sleep logs, so you can just write it down and just put your mood when you wake up. You just want to feel rested,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And a lot of times people are going to bed too late, right? Because if we go to bed too late, like sleep begets sleep, we miss that window where we can like restfully fall to sleep. Yeah. Other habit questions? Questions for me? You guys look very solemn. I was not supposed to be so serious. Go ahead.
Yeah, I love everything about this. Do you have a coach? Someone who is
I
continually lifting you up?
do, yeah, I do have a coach, yeah, who's constantly making, suggesting I do more group coaching and seminars and webinars, but there's only so much of me, so. Yeah, and it's interesting, there's still a lot of coaches in the world, but I am one of the few, I like to think, that works on achieving their goals through habit change. Because most people are like, we'll take you on a journey, but it's not so sort of behavioral focused. And part of it is that I'm super type A, like probably most of you, and I was so sick of going to so much therapy, and by the end being like, just tell me what to do. I just want someone to tell me what to do in the morning, Just give me a 5-minute thing to do. And so I started reading, these different things, and that's how I found Hal Elrod, and I was like, wow, these practices are amazing, right? Go ahead.
So, your example about the cookie and the talking to your coworkers. Yeah. Obviously, some habits are higher reward value than others.
Correct.
So, how do you? Because, in that example of you don't get the cookie, you get the water. To me, the cookie might be the reward. So how do you deal with that's something that obviously there's $1 billion industry on weight loss. How do you deal with high value rewards if they're not serving you?
Well, you can change around the system, right? So you can change it up.
Okay.
You drink 60 ounces of water a day, you get a cookie.
Okay, see that I can do.
Or exercise.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
So I mean, like I used to have a nutritional coach who used to tell me, okay, as long as you eat what I tell you to 80% of the time, we're good. So I asked her what I do 20% of the time. She said, don't tell me. So it's a lot of it's changing. You are right. Things can be triggers. Things can be all of the three. Like a cookie could be the trigger.
Yeah.
Right. You eat a cookie and then you eat a pint of ice cream. Right.
Mhm.
So it's like you can't just it's like for me if I eat like one gummy bear, I'm gonna eat the whole pack.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So if the person is a trigger,
Yes.
how do you address the person to no longer be?
Well, one of the things I like to so the question was, if the person is the trigger, how do you address that? Well, one of the things I always like to tell people is we are always in choice. What does that mean? It is your life and you get to choose. You get to choose how you spend your time. You get to choose who you spend it with. And you get to choose what you want to do. So I'm going to go back. You get to choose how you spend your time and who you spend your time with. But did I answer your question? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of triggers for us. Like, an example is, I don't keep Oreos in my house. If they're in my house, I will eat them all. Right? I also don't keep negative people around. Now, it's really interesting. I just read this book by Brian Tracy. I don't know if you guys know who he is. He's like a time management guy. But he was saying that all of the very, very, very highly successful people, we're talking like Richard Branson, not only do they all hang out with each other, which is pretty cool, but they all have one thing in common. When you ask them, what is the greatest benefit of being as successful as you are? You know what they all say? Not ever having to hang out with negative people ever again. We just don't allow it. They're not around us. Interesting, huh? Other questions?
It's not a question. I just have to say thank you. This was well
Oh.
timed because I just recently on my phone I was doing the sleep timer.
Yeah.
After a long time, but they changed it to now it makes it do not disturb, and that gave me anxiety. Just to figure out like I need 7 hours of sleep, but it puts it on D&D, and that stresses me out to think that you couldn't interrupt my sleep. So this was well timed for me to really think about some areas of my life. Thank you.
Yeah, there's this wonderful thing. I just did a 5-day sleep challenge. I think Kelly did it, but a 5-day time challenge, sorry. And the title of it was How to Add More Time to Your Life. And we're talking about, sleep and anxiety. And what am I talking about?
Sleep time.
Sleep time. Yes. And one of the things in the sleep challenge, why do I call it sleep challenge? In the time challenge is that all of those devices, if you're using them, actually waste more time, right? So you're better off turning that off and putting your phone in the bathroom, right? And using a sleep log like with your pen and paper. You're also really important to know if that's a goal of yours, why it's a goal of yours. Okay. Usually what gives us anxiety is this idea of not being clear on our priorities. So something I have all my clients do is, what are the top 3 priorities in your life? I'll tell you mine. Mine are kids and family. Mine are coaching and work. And mine are self-care. Now when I go look at my calendar, or my goals, right? If sleep's one of yours, I make sure there's nothing in my way on my calendar that isn't one of those 3 priorities. If it's like to listen to some random webinar, I'm just not going to do it. Because all that input, having all that information that we don't need, I actually don't have cable news, by the way, is so liberating. I don't watch the news or read the paper. My life has continued. Not having that makes us sleep better. It also lowers our anxiety. And if you're interested to know what your top goal is in your life, this is called your definite purpose. You think to yourself, what goal, if I accomplished in the next 24 hours, would have the highest impact on my life? And whatever that answer, you should be doing an hour of that every day. I'll leave you there. Thank you guys so much.